The human mind can build endless prisons, but the strongest are the ones we construct for ourselves, brick by brick, with our own lies. On a cold, rain-slicked February morning in 1971, inside a stark military courtroom at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Captain Jeffrey MacDonald, a Princeton-educated Green Beret doctor, was beginning a life sentence within such a prison, a sentence of disbelief that would prove far more confining than any cell. But to understand the crushing weight of that verdict, we must first go back to the blood-soaked horror of a year earlier, to a small, tidy house on 544 Castle Drive, where the American dream was savagely dismembered. Jeffrey MacDonald was the picture of mid-century success. Handsome, brilliant, an Ivy League graduate, and a respected Army physician. His wife, Colette, 26, was a poised and intelligent woman, a graduate of Mount Holyoke, who radiated a warm, earnest kindness. Their world revolved around their two daughters, 5-year-old Kimberly, a bright-eyed girl who loved her father fiercely, and 2-year-old Kristen, whose cherubic face and tiny laughter filled the home. From the outside, it was a perfect life, a testament to post-war promise. But inside the home, a tension was brewing. Colette, exhausted with caring for 2 young children, had begun to gently push Jeff to be more present, more of a hands-on father and husband. Friends noted a slight strain, a subtle friction beneath the polished surface. Jeff seemed increasingly preoccupied with his image, his career, his standing. He was a man who cherished the perception of control. That control shattered in the pre-dawn hours of February 17, 1970. The 911 call came from Jeffrey MacDonald himself, his voice a frantic, gasping plea. "I need help. My wife and kids have been murdered." Military police arrived to a scene from a nightmare. The living room was a shambles. Overturned furniture, a broken coffee table, and on the floor, Jeffrey MacDonald, in blood-stained pajamas, lying beside his wife's body, weeping uncontrollably. Colette had been brutally bludgeoned and stabbed multiple times. A blue pajama top was draped over her chest, as if placed there with some macabre tenderness. In their bedrooms, the little girls had been similarly slaughtered. Kimberly had suffered massive head wounds. Kristen, still in her crib, had been stabbed over 40 times. The word "pig" was written in blood on the headboard of the master bed. MacDonald, wounded himself with a minor ice pick puncture in his abdomen, told a chaotic, horrifying story. He claimed 4 intruders, 3 men and a woman with long flowing blonde hair and a wide-brimmed floppy hat, holding a flickering candle and chanting, "Acid is groovy. Kill the pigs," had broken in, attacked his family, and stabbed him when he tried to fight them off. The initial shock and sympathy for the grieving doctor soon curdled into deep suspicion. The military investigators, and later the FBI, found that the crime scene was a meticulously staged tableau. The evidence began to whisper a different, darker story. There was no sign of forced entry. The "pig" written on the headboard was done with such neat, deliberate strokes it seemed impossible it was written in the frenzy of a murderous rampage. Most damningly, 48 holes were punctured in that blue pajama top draped over Colette. But the wounds on her body underneath did not align. The top had been placed on her after she was killed. And then there were the fibers. Tiny blue threads from that pajama top were found not on the intruders MacDonald described, but under the bodies of his daughters and, most crucially, knotted into the ligature of a glove he claimed one attacker wore. The physics of the scene defied his story. The coffee table had been broken from the inside out, suggesting it was smashed by someone standing over it, not by a falling body. The only blood found outside the home was a single drop on the porch, which belonged to MacDonald himself. His wounds were superficial, theatrically placed. The pieces of the puzzle were not forming the picture of a hippie massacre, but of a cold, calculated, and deeply personal act of violence. For nearly a decade, Jeffrey MacDonald fought the system, leveraging his charm, his intellect, and his network of powerful supporters. He was initially exonerated by the Army. He gave a compelling interview to Esquire magazine, which portrayed him as a tragic victim of a bungled investigation. He became a cause célèbre, a handsome doctor wrongly accused. He remarried, had another child, and built a new life. But the shadow of those bloody pajama fibers followed him. A relentless federal prosecutor, Jim Blackburn, and a tenacious investigative journalist, Joe McGinnis, became obsessed with the case. The grand jury testimony was a masterclass in dismantling a persona. Witnesses emerged who had heard MacDonald, weeks before the murders, complain about his family responsibilities holding him back. A former girlfriend came forward, stating he had once asked her to lie about his whereabouts on the night of the killings. The flaky, candle-holding woman he described was traced to a real person, a young woman named Helena Steckley, who was a known drug user in Fayetteville. But her confession to being at the house that night was erratic, drug-addled, and unreliable. The prosecution argued MacDonald had used her existence as a template for his elaborate, psychedelic lie. The 1979 civilian trial was a national spectacle. The climax did not come with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating revelation. The prosecution presented its theory of the crime. An argument had escalated. Colette, perhaps after finding a Kimberly's toy horse broken on the living room floor, had confronted him. In a rage, he had struck her. The violence escalated into a frenzy. He had then taken the murder weapon, an ice pick and a knife from his own kitchen, and gone into the rooms of his sleeping daughters, ensuring there were no witnesses to his crime. He then staged the scene, planting the clues of the intruders, carefully crafting a story he believed would be too bizarre not to be true. The final, powerful blow to the defense was not a piece of physical evidence, but a psychological one. The jury saw the Esquire article, and they saw the man who had cooperated with it. They saw not a grieving father, but a narcissist, meticulously rebuilding his image on the graves of his family. After 6 days of deliberation, the verdict was guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder for Colette and Kimberly, and first-degree murder for Kristen. Jeffrey MacDonald, now in his late 70s, remains in federal prison, having exhausted every appeal. He is a man forever trapped in the story he invented, a prisoner of his own elaborate fiction. The 4 hippie intruders have long since faded into the mists of folklore, ghosts of a story that never was. The only real monster in the house on Castle Drive that night was the one who already lived there, the one who put his children to bed, kissed his wife goodnight, and then extinguished their lives to free himself from a future he no longer desired. Some stories are not about who did it, but about the terrifying lengths to which a human being will go to convince the world, and perhaps even himself, that he didn't. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.